Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saujanya Jamboni. I am with the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research Office of Strategic Programs. And on behalf of all of my FDA colleagues, I'd like to thank you and welcome you all to the patient-focused drug development meeting on breast cancer. So it's really nice to meet so many of you, and especially for all of you that I've been speaking to on the phone. It's nice to finally get to meet you all in person, and we really appreciate that you're all here because we have so much to learn from you today. So I'm the facilitator for today's meeting, and I'm going to spend just a few minutes going over the agenda. You all should have a copy of that. If not, we have some copies out on the registration desk. And then I'll go over a few housekeeping items, and we'll get started. Okay, so we'll start off today with some presentations from my FDA colleagues. They are going to provide some opening remarks, an overview of the Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative, and a background on breast cancer and current treatment options. And then I'll come back and I'll go over the discussion format for the day. So we have two discussion topics. Topic one is on the disease symptoms that matter most to you as the patient. And topic two is on your perspectives on current approaches to treating breast cancer. And we'll have a panel discussion followed by a group discussion for each of those topics. And that'll take us to pretty much the last half an hour of the day, which we reserve for open public comment. And open public comment it's basically a time that anybody in the audience, not just patients or patient representatives, but if anybody wants to share additional thoughts or perspectives that are outside of the scope of topic one or topic two, we encourage you to sign up for open public comment. And you can sign up out on the registration desk. There's a sign-up sheet there, and we'll take sign up until break time, and then we'll take a look at how many people signed up and how much time each speaker will have. And then we'll wrap up the day with some closing remarks. So as you can see, it's a pretty full day of discussion, but we're really, really thankful that you're here, and we're looking forward to a great day of discussion. Just a few housekeeping items. The bathrooms are back out into the lobby area, and if you make a right and go all the way down the hallway, you'll see the bathrooms there. And you will also see that we have a kiosk that sells basic snacks, drinks, sandwiches for you to purchase if you would like. So please feel comfortable to get up and stretch, take a break, get a snack if you need to. We want you to feel as comfortable as you can and, do what you need to do to just be comfortable. And also, I just want to mention this meeting is being recorded and transcribed, and within a few days after the meeting, the recording and the transcript will be available for you on the meeting website. So with that, can I just have my FDA colleagues please introduce yourselves?
Hello, and thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jeff Kim. I'm the Division Director for the Division of Oncology Products 1, where the many or most of the drugs related to the treatment of breast cancers are regulated.
Hi, I'm Amna Ibrahim. I'm the Deputy Division Director for DOP1.
My name is Supernova. I'm a medical reviewer in the Division of Oncology Products in the breast cancer group.
My name is Amy McKee. I'm the clinical team leader in DOP1 of one of two teams that handles breast cancer products.
Hello, I'm Teresa Mullen. I direct the Office of Strategic Programs in the Center for Drugs, and I am the lead for this patient-focused drug development effort for the center. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Ashley Slagle with the Study Endpoint staff in the Office of New Drugs.
Good afternoon, John Kupol. I direct the Office of Minority Health in the Office of the Commissioner.
And could I have my colleagues over here introduce yourselves?
Graham Thompson, Office of Strategic Programs.
Brigitte Vaida, Office of Strategic Programs.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amna for her presentation.
Good afternoon again, and welcome to today's meeting on breast cancer patient-focused drug development. As I introduce myself, I'm Amna Ibrahim. I'm the Deputy Division Director of DOP1. Our division houses the breast cancer group where the drugs which are aimed at the treatment of breast cancer reside. This is a very important meeting, and we are looking forward to hearing from participants about their experiences and with what they look for in treatments for this condition. We are happy to see so many patients and advocates in the audience, and I understand that there are many others joining remotely from the web. Thank you for being here and being part of this meeting. Today's meeting is one in a series of what is called FDA's Patient-Focused Drug Development Meetings. Teresa Mullen will be talking about this initiative in more detail in a few minutes. Breast cancer has a significant public health impact on the country. It is the most common cancer among women in the U.S. We are really looking forward to hearing directly from patients about the symptoms they experience and how they view existing and potential therapies for treating breast cancer, and the challenges they face in prolonging life while also maintaining quality of life. When we discuss drug development, we are referring to the process of identifying and evaluating potential therapies that can help patients treat their cancer. FDA's mission is to protect and promote public health by evaluating the safety and effectiveness of new drugs. While we play a critical role in drug development, we are just one part in the process. We do not develop drugs or conduct clinical trials. Drug companies, often working with researchers or patient communities, are the ones who conduct the trials and submit applications for new drugs to FDA. We work closely with these drug companies throughout their drug development process. We are therefore glad to see such representation and interest in today's meeting from industry, academia, and other government partners in the room and on the web. I want to spend a few minutes providing a bit of background on FDA's important role in drug evaluation. For a drug to be approved for marketing, FDA must determine that it is safe and effective for its intended use. Our regulatory decisions are based on science, medicine, as well as legal and regulatory standards. First and foremost, the drug must demonstrate a minimum standard of efficacy for its intended use. The safety of a drug should be such that the benefits of the drug should outweigh the risks. The FDA makes determination for the risk-benefit assessment for the new drug based on the totality of information provided by a sponsor in the new drug or biologic application, which is a request for marketing authorization in the U.S. FDA benefit risk assessment takes into account many factors, such as the disease setting, the population of patients treated, presence of alternative therapies for the indication, and the improvement provided by them, the magnitude of the demonstrated benefit, and the nature of the risks associated with the product. What we hear today can help us understand how patients view benefits and risks, and will strengthen our understanding of what patients want to see in their treatment options. Sometimes we struggle with how to evaluate treatments that might have a small benefit to patients and a very large risk. So hearing what patients think about these issues can really help strengthen our benefit-risk thinking in those situations. Thank you again for your participation and for being here today. We do appreciate it. I'll now turn it over to Teresa Mullen, who will provide some background on FDA's overall patient-focused drug development efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Amna. And good afternoon again, and thank you for joining us at this meeting today. This meeting on breast cancer is one of for us, a series of meetings where we're launching this new effort under this reauthorization of the user fee program. And I wanted to just spend a minute to put it in that context for you before we get into the specifics of, looking for the keyboard, of the questions and the content of the focus of our meeting today. As Dr. Abraham mentioned, she referred to the risk-benefit or the benefit-risk assessment framework that's used in our review of new drugs and even continuing to look at drugs on the market over time. Two of the factors in that framework are the severity of the condition, sort of the experience of the patient, and the severity of the impact of the disease on their life, and in fact including the treatment on their life, and what treatments are available today, and how well do those treatments work, and what is it like to have to use those treatments for the patient. And those two components really set the stage, and this is what reviewers have told us over as we've developed this framework. That sets the stage for their evaluation of the other evidence that they have, the benefit information, what they hear about the safety issues, how you might manage those risks. So those two components are really where we wanted to focus and get more information. And at the start of this effort in 2012, we realized that we had very limited means for getting that kind of information from patients. We have a patient representative program, and that's very valuable, except that the limitation there is that we have to put the patient representative, who may or may not have the disease that is of interest, and they have to go through conflict of interest screening. We don't, because we're talking about a particular drug, we have to make sure there's no conflict there. And so that really limits the input we can get. And we know that you can't, one person really would have an impossible job to represent the views of all the diversity of patients who may be experiencing a condition. And so we wanted to have a meeting structured not around a product, but around the disease area, so we could not have to deal with that screening and really get a much broader and more diverse range of input from people who are suffering from the disease, or in some cases people or families who are living with persons and caring for people with a particular disease. So that was the motivation for this. And we realized patients are the most critical informant really for these benefit risk assessments, because the patient's the one who will be using the drug and getting any benefit there is to gain and be suffering any harm there is that they may be exposed to from the drug. And so how could we get a better, richer and broader input from the patient community? And so this is a sort of experiment, if you will. We're doing these 20 meetings. Breast cancer is one of the 20 diseases that we chose, and the review division identified breast cancer as one of the priorities for them. And you'll hear more from their questions today about what they're hoping to gain and the opportunity there. And so these 20 are really giving us a test bed to figure out where do we go from here in this kind of engaging the patient more and getting more systematic input from patients to inform drug development. And so this is part of the effort. We began it in 2012. We put out an announcement with a set of diseases that we got public comment. We got over 4,000 comments from the public about the list that we published with other ideas as well. We took that list and the input that we got and identified 16 diseases for the first 3 years of the program. And in a few months, we'll be able to publish the set of diseases that have been identified for the final 2 years of this 5-year program. I say final years of this program, but this is what we view as the first phase of this effort. We very much plan to continue and evolve it and actually expand it beyond this 5-year period. Here's the list of the diseases that we've included in the first 3 years, and as you can see, today's meeting is focused on breast cancer. We have 4 more coming up later in this fiscal year, so between now and the end of September, we'll have some others. And and as I said, we'll be covering more later. There are some standard questions related to those 2 considerations that I mentioned, severity of the condition and the impact and benefits of the treatments currently available are the focus of every one of these meetings. So there's some standard questions that we'll cover related to those in the disease area. And then we'll also be asking other questions. I say we, but I particularly mean the review leadership is probably going to be asking other questions as well of things that they may want to probe further, taking advantage of the opportunity of having you here in the room and having our participants on the webcast to get firsthand input from you about other things that they may be concerned or aspects of treatment or development that they think you would be particularly able to help them understand better or inform. We produce a report after these meetings. It's called the Voice of the Patient Report, and those are available on our website. If you Google Voice of the Patient, I mean, I'm lazy, that's what I would do, but I mean, that's how I find stuff on our website. I go to Google. But, and don't share that with our IT people, please. But it's a report that tries to capture very faithfully not just what people tell us, but really what and how they tell it to us, because how they describe what they're going through is just very much part of the what. And so we recognize that. We try to capture that. We both get the information from the room, from the input from our webcast, and we keep an electronic docket open for any additional information that you may think of or have you want us to include in what we capture as part of this report effort, and other comments that we get are submitted to the docket. We give a few more weeks for that to come in, and then we take all that to produce these reports. And they provide a very useful way to capture that information for subsequent reference by the review divisions. When they maybe get another application in for that disease area, they'll go back, and we actually shape up those first two sections. We provide some examples of how what they might be thinking about and encapsulate some of it. The reports are short enough that they're readable, and reviewers and others, we hope, I've heard from friends who are patients with some of the diseases that we've had that the reports have resonated with them too, which is very gratifying for us to hear. That's what we hope to do. But it's a first step. It does provide that context, and it's also prompting a certain amount of further thinking on our part about what we want to do to sort of more systematically capture this information longer term, maybe find ways to capture it and measure it so that it can become evidence of benefit in addition to providing very critical context. And so that's what we're doing with this effort. And with that, I'll turn it over to Suparna Vedam, who's going to give us more information about the background of the disease and current treatments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. Good afternoon. So, as mentioned earlier, my name is Supurna Vedam, and I'm a medical officer in the Division of Oncology Products here in the breast cancer group. I also continue to see patients regularly, breast cancer patients in the clinic each week, actually on Thursdays, so today is my clinic day, but I thought it was very important to come to this meeting here. So I am well aware of the direct impact of our treatment decisions. As far as the benefit that they provide, which is obviously the intended goal of our therapy, but also the unfortunate side effects and toxicity that we have to deal with. And this can be wide-ranging from very mild, such as some dry skin or mild constipation, to much more serious or severe, such as blood clots or debilitating neuropathy. And as patients are living longer and the treatments are becoming more chronic, this is more important than ever that we really take these all into consideration in our treatment decisions. So again, I'm going to echo the sentiments of my previous speakers that I'm very happy you're here. I think this is a very important forum, and it's fantastic that we have this opportunity to hear from you today. So my task today is to give a brief background on breast cancer and the therapeutic options. Using the clicker. Oh, there we go. Okay. So as mentioned earlier, breast cancer remains a major public health concern. We've made major strides over the last few decades, but we still have a lot of work to do. It is the second leading cause of cancer-related death among women in the United States, second only to lung cancer. And this year, it's estimated that a little over 230,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and a little over 40,000 women will die of the disease in this country. So as with all cancers, breast cancer is very complicated, and we don't really know what exactly causes it. But there are many risk factors that have been associated with breast cancer and implicated in its etiology. And these are often divided into unmodifiable and modifiable risks, which I've listed in two columns here. So on the left-hand column are some of the unmodifiable risks, which, as the word implies, are things that we cannot change, we do not have control over, yet they put us at a higher risk, such as being of female gender, increasing age, certain genetic risk factors. This actually only makes up about 5 to 10% of breast cancers, and what we most commonly hear about out in the public and the media is BRCA1 and BRCA2. But there are many other genes that increase risk of breast cancer, such as ATM, P53, PALB2. They're just much rarer, and we don't understand them that well. These are not important only for screening and for monitoring, but they may have therapeutic implications as we understand them better. Also important are personal and family history, dense breast tissue, certain breast conditions such as atypia or hyperplasia, and the age of menarche and menopause. In the right-hand column are some modifiable risk factors. So these are things that we have control over and could potentially change. nulliparity, which is not having children, certain hormonal birth control methods, hormone replacement in menopause, breastfeeding, alcohol use, obesity, and physical activity. There are many other factors that have been mentioned and discussed, and it's not really clear, again, what their association is. Oops. Oh. Okay. So when patients present to us with a suspected breast cancer, they're actually often asymptomatic. A patient may have a palpable breast mass that they've felt themselves or that has been palpated by a healthcare provider. But in this country, actually, most people present after an abnormality has been seen on a screening mammogram or MRI. In the late stage, patients may have some generalized constitutional symptoms such as fatigue, weight loss, or decreased appetite, or more localized symptoms such as bone pain or abdominal discomfort, depending on where the tumor is. But even then, a portion remain asymptomatic. And I think this is important to keep in mind that actually most breast cancer patients, when they're diagnosed, are asymptomatic and feel well, but we can make them feel unwell with our treatments. So we want to make sure that that toxicity is really balanced with a clear benefit. Okay. So once breast cancer is suspected, we need tissue confirmation, as a diagnosis cannot be made on physical exam or imaging alone. The tissue is important not only to confirm breast cancer, but to gain other important information in formulating a treatment plan. And then once the diagnosis is confirmed, we stage the patient according to the TNM system. So this looks at the size of the tumor, the extent of nodal status, and whether metastases, distant metastases, are present or not. And the patients are given a stage of 1, 2, 3, or 4. And this is shown in the schematic here. So stage 1 breast cancer is where the tumor is confined to the breast. Stage 2 is where the tumor might be slightly larger and may have lymph node involvement. Stage 3 is where the tumor may be yet a little larger, may have more lymph node involvement, and may have some chest wall involvement. And stage 4 is where the tumor has moved out of the breast and locoregional area. And actually only a minority of the patients are diagnosed at stage 4 at the onset. This is really only about 5 to 10% of patients. So stage is not important only for prognosis, but again, to formulate our treatment plan and to really know what our goal of therapy is, whether it's for curative intent or for palliation. Along with that, we need to know if the tumor is invasive or non-invasive, and actually this we usually know before we stage the patient. Tumor histology, the estrogen receptor status, progesterone receptor status, and HER2 status. And these are important not only for prognostic reasons, but have predictive value also because we have treatments targeted toward these, and we want to make sure that we're using it in our treatment plan. We also look at the histologic grade of the tumor, and certain genomic testing may be warranted. And finally, we look at the age and associated comorbidities. So our understanding of breast cancer has greatly evolved over the last couple decades. And this is really with the advent of molecular profiling and more genomic tests. So we're now at the point that we really understand breast cancer is not just one disease. It's quite varied and diverse. And actually, it's a compilation of several different subsets that behave very differently. In clinical practice, we already subset these to some extent. And that's by assessing the hormone receptor status, the HER2 status, and we use certain genomic tests, such as Oncotype DX, to assess if further adjuvant chemotherapy is needed or not. But there are many other tools that are being used for research purposes in clinical trials. These are not quite ready for routine use yet, but really it's only a matter of time. As our understanding of the biology and the subsets continue to mature, we are going to use more and more of these tools in the clinic to help identify the right patient for the right treatment. So the way that we make a treatment plan now is really a combination of several different modalities. And this includes surgery, radiation therapy, cytotoxic chemotherapy, targeted therapy, and one other box I'm missing, which is actually on the next slide, is hormonal therapy. Some patients may receive all of these or only a few of these. And again, it goes back to all of those factors I discussed earlier, the stage of the patient, and the goal of therapy. It's great that we have a lot of options that we can kind of put together and that we can treat patients, but unfortunately none of them are benign. They all come with side effects. They can be overlapping side effects. They can be different side effects. And only some of them are listed here. Obviously, it's not a complete list. And some of the side effects can be quite toxic. And so it's very important that we're discussing this with patients as we're making the treatment decisions of how we proceed. So some of the approved therapies that we do have available to us, again, this is not an exhaustive list. And in fact, I'm missing one of our most recently approved drugs, palbociclib, on this list. But we do have several hormonal agents, and we choose to use those based on menopausal status and kind of the stage of therapy, whether it's in the adjuvant setting or metastatic setting. We have several cytotoxic chemotherapy agents that we can use in combination or as single agents, and then targeted therapies. And the 4 that I have listed here are used solely in HER2-positive tumors. So again, we do have many therapies that are approved at this time. But in approving any of these therapies, it comes back to this balancing act again. In oncology, we are always dealing with a serious disease. And unfortunately, our treatments can be toxic. And so in approving a drug, we really want to make sure that we are helping make a patient live better or live longer. And so, in other words, this means that they have some direct clinical benefit, either improving in how they feel or function or prolonging their survival. And so I think this is my last slide. So one of the ways that we can get direct measurement of this as far as the treatment benefit is obviously from the patient. So we can use these patient-reported outcomes, or PROs, which are direct measures of treatment benefit, and allow the patients to be involved, because we know that healthcare providers underreport these side effects, so we can get a more accurate assessment. Here at the FDA, we definitely encourage use of these if they're used properly, because then they can be very helpful. And properly means that they're well-defined, reliable, validated tools that are measuring what they say that they're measuring. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you to my FDA colleagues for your remarks. So I'm going to now go over the discussion format again. And as I mentioned, we have, can we go to the next slide? Okay. So as I mentioned, we have 2 discussion topics for today. The first is on the symptoms that matter most to you. So in this topic, what we're listening for is, how do you live with your breast cancer? How do you experience your breast cancer? What are the symptoms that are most important to you? And how do they impact your day-to-day life? So here you can tell us, are there activities that you can't do at all or as fully as you would like because of your symptoms? Also, if you can share with us how your symptoms have evolved over time and how they've changed for you since diagnosis, that would also be very helpful. In topic 2, we're going to discuss current approaches to treating breast cancer. So here what we're listening for is, what is your current treatment regimen? What are the benefits that you see of your current treatment regimen? Is it working for you? And vice versa, what are the downsides? What are the biggest side effects that you experience? Also, what do you look for in an ideal treatment? We're also going to spend a portion of topic 2 talking about the factors that go into the decisions you make regarding treatment options. So first we're going to hear from a panel of patients, and on that note, could I have my topic 1 panelists come on up and have a seat? So the purpose of the panel discussion is to really set the stage for the greater group discussion. Our panelists reflect a range of experiences with breast cancer, and I have had the privilege of working with them over the last 2 weeks, and I know they've spent a lot of time and put in a lot of effort to put your thoughts down, so we really appreciate that you're here doing this. Our panelists will have 5 minutes to present their remarks, and after they finish their remarks, we will open the dialogue, broaden the dialogue, to invite more patients and patient representatives in the audience. So the purpose of the group discussion is to really build on what you've heard from the panel. So share with us not only what is similar for you, but also how you experience differently the breast cancer. Periodically, I'll look to my FDA panel for some follow-up questions. And we invite you to continue participating in the conversation. You can raise your hand, and we'll have microphone runners around the room, and they'll come to you. And if you're comfortable to do so, just raise your hand. They'll come to you and just tell us your first name, and you can present your comments. So there's a few other ways that we're going to be learning from you today. And one of those is that we're going to be doing these polling questions. And on that note, could I have the clickers passed out? Thank you. So the polling questions, they're not a scientific survey. It's entirely voluntary. But what it allows us to do is to get more understanding of the perspectives in the room. And we're going to be trying those out in just a bit. So for those of you in the room, you'll use the clickers to answer the polling questions. And for those of you on the web, you can also participate via the webcast. And we do ask that only patients and patient representatives respond to the polling questions, please. So as I just mentioned, we also have a very active webcast today. We have nearly 100 people joining us on the web. So for all of you on the web, you're a very important part of today's meeting. You're a very critical part of today's meeting. And although we can't see you, your voice is being heard. We will periodically check in with you. And we'll have you, you'll also have the opportunity to call in by telephone and share your comments throughout the meeting. And we will make sure that we capture all of the comments that you're providing us via the webcast, and they'll be incorporated into our summary report. So another last way that we will be getting more information from you, more of your experiences and perspectives, is this very important public docket that will keep open for 2 months after the meeting. So it will be open until June 2nd, and you see the website up here. We encourage you to continue to keep visiting this website and continue to share your thoughts, share your comments as they come to mind. And they are a very important part of the meeting, so it's an extension of today's meeting to continue to hear from you. All of these comments in the public docket will be, we will read through those, we will summarize those and incorporate them into our summary report. And anyone is welcome to comment. We also have a few resources here at the FDA that we want to share with you. The first is the FDA's Office of Health and Constituent Affairs, OCA, and the second is the Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Group, PACE. And both of these organizations within FDA are their liaison, they're your link between the FDA and the public and patient groups. So we encourage you to reach out to them if you have any questions at all. So I'm going to go over, last but not least, a few discussion ground rules for the day. First, we encourage patients to contribute to the dialogue, and patients and patient representatives also. So we know that there are academia, government agencies, industry. We really appreciate that all of you are here today to join us at the meeting. This meeting will be very important to you too. We just ask that you stay in listening mode. Today is really about listening and learning from the patients and patient representatives. And on that note, the FDA also, we are in listening mode for the day. Periodically, we will have some follow-up questions from the FDA panel, so I'll turn to them. And the third is that the discussion will focus on symptoms and treatments. So, as I mentioned, we have 2 topic questions today, and we're going to, these are the topic questions that are most beneficial for us at the FDA to learn from you on. So we will do our best to stay on topic, and if there's anything else, as I mentioned, that you'd like to share outside of the scope of topic 1 or topic 2, again, we encourage you to sign up for open public comment. The views expressed today are personal opinions, and so on that note, respect for one another is paramount. And last but not least, let us know how the meeting went today. So we will have evaluation forms out on the registration desk, and we'll also pass them out closer to the end of the meeting. It's really important for us that you fill these out and let us know what worked and didn't work so that we can continue to improve these meetings for you. And as I mentioned, I just want to reiterate again that we're just really thankful and grateful that you're here. Again, we want you to feel comfortable. We want you to go ahead and get up and stretch if you need to. I'm personally very happy that there's nice weather outside. So for those of you that traveled from afar, hopefully you're experiencing DC at beautiful spring weather. Okay, so first what we will do is we're going to start with some polling questions. So everybody get your clickers out. Okay. Oh, they don't have clickers. Sorry. Okay, everyone have your clicker ready? Great. Okay, so the first one is an easy one. Where do you live? Press A for within the DC metro area, or B for outside of the DC metro area. Press A. Yep. Right. Yes. What? That's okay. Okay. And oh, it looks like we might be having some difficulties with this. Let's try it one more time. Can you click again? Either A or B? Not working? That's okay. Let's raise hands instead. Okay. So can I just see by a show of hands, how many are from the DC metro area? Great. So we have a lot of neighbors visiting. And so I imagine the rest of you are from outside of the DC metro area, right? So thank you for coming. I know there's been a lot of travel, California, Texas, Massachusetts. I've met so many of you from different parts of the country. So thank you for being here. It means a lot to us. Let's go to the next question. Have you ever been diagnosed as having breast cancer? Shall we give it a try? Okay, let's try this one. Press A for yes, or B for no. No, oh, and we're doing hands. We'll do hands again. Thank you all for being such a good sport about this. So, can you raise your hand for A, yes? Okay. And B, no. Okay, well, thank you very much for all of you that are here to share your perspectives and experiences with us. You will have so much we have so much to learn from you. So we appreciate that you're here. Okay, so this one, there's going to be a lot of hand raising, I guess. Okay, what is your age or your loved one's age? A, younger than 30. B, 31 to 40. Okay, we have a few of you. C, 41 to 50. Okay. D, 51 to 60. Okay. E, 61 to 70. Great. And F, 71 or greater. Great, thank you. And I'm not sure if the webcast polling is working. Are we seeing similar results?
Yeah, we had, for the previous question, about 64% diagnosed with breast cancer. For this one, 30% of people between 41 and 50, 41% between 51 and 60, and 10% for the other categories.
Okay, great. Let's go on to the next one. Are you A, male, or B, female? I imagine most of us are here female. Okay. Okay, and I think this is our last, or actually we may have one more. Okay, so what is the length of time since your diagnosis? A, less than 1 year ago. Okay, so no responses there. B, 1 year ago to 2 years ago. Okay, so it looks like we have one newly diagnosed. C, 2 years ago to 5 years ago. Okay, so we have about 4 hands. D, more than 5 years ago. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people responding are in this category, more than 5 years ago. And E, I'm not sure. Okay. How about on the webcast?
On the web, we have 18% for less than 1 year ago, 18% again for 1 to 2 years ago, 18% to 2 to 5 years ago, 43% for more than 5 years ago.
Okay, so similar to what we're seeing in the room. Great. Okay, which of the following best describes your current condition? A, my cancer is localized and has not spread outside my breast and or local lymph nodes. Okay, so we have one. Okay. B, my cancer has spread, metastasized to the rest of my body. Okay, so I'm counting about eight or so, 8 or 9. Okay. C, I have been treated for my cancer and currently have no evidence of disease. Okay, so I see about 6 or 7 hands raised. And D, I'm not sure. Okay. How about on the web?
13% say their cancer is localized, 6% say it is metastasized, and 80% said they have been treated and currently have no evidence of disease.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that will take us to our discussion topic. Thank you all again for bearing with us as our technology did not work. So let's have our topic 1 panelists please introduce yourselves.
I'm Karen Durham.
Okay, go ahead if you want to just, yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Katie McRae.
Hi, I'm Debbie Drake Dunn.
Sandy Feinstone.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, our topic 1 panelists will read off their remarks, and I am going to, I just want to say thank you so much for preparing all of your summary statements and for sharing these stories with us today. So can we start with Karen, if you don't mind? No, you can just press the red button. There you go.
Good afternoon. As I introduced myself, I'm Karen Durham, and I'm from Lindale, Texas. I was originally diagnosed with an aggressive, invasive, stage 2 breast cancer 25 years ago, and you didn't have hardly any treatment options 25 years ago. But I went through all of my surgeries, I completed all of my chemotherapy treatments, and I did great for 19 years. Then in January of 2009, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic disease. Surgery was not an option. I went on a clinical trial, and I took 2 drugs, different drugs, a day on the clinical trial. They were pill form. I thought I was doing really well until 2 months ago. In January 2015, I had disease progression with 4 new tumors. This was really emotionally challenging because the length of time between each of the diagnoses was so long. I was lulled into a sense of kind of maybe a security that that was it. It was not going to go any further. There is no sense of security when you have breast cancer. Right now, I'm doing fine for somebody that's being treated for metastatic disease. But I do not make any long-term plans. It's 6 to 12 months or less because I never know what the future is going to bring. To put this a little bit in perspective, in the 6 years and 2 months since I was diagnosed metastatic, I have had 193 visits with my oncologist. That's not scan time, treatment time, any other doctor time. That's just with my oncologist. That averages out to about 2.6 visits a month. I have a wonderful caregiver in my husband. He has made all but one of these appointments with me. I have many side effects from the 25 years, both from the surgery and from the different treatments that I've been on. I have cognitive impairment, hot flashes, dry skin, weight gain, headaches, joint and muscle pain, diarrhea, and mouth sores, just to mention a few. The list goes on. I have chronic severe lymphedema in my left arm from my surgery, which was different 25 years ago. I was prone to current infections, which can be life-threatening if they're not treated properly immediately. Now I'm on a daily antibiotic as a preventative for these infections. It's very depressing when I go shopping for clothes. I have to try on clothes that fit my left arm, not the rest of my body. To fit my left arm, it's a woman's size 22 to 24. The rest of my body is a size 12. It's depressing. Fatigue has become a part of my daily life. It's just something I have learned to live with. Some days it's better than other days. For the 6 years, I was on the 2 different chemotherapy treatments a day in pill form. Now I have 5 pills that I take. It's 2 drugs, different drugs, and I am on a different clinical trial. But you know, I think back, I cannot remember when I did not have a queasy stomach and smells made me very nauseous. It's been that long ago in 6 years and 2 months. I have peripheral neuropathy in my feet and legs. Sometimes the bottoms of my feet burn so badly that I cannot stand to have even socks on them. My legs do not feel like they have the strength to hold me up going up or down stairs. Walking on flat surfaces is just fine. So when I go up or down the stairs, it's 1 stair at a time, and I hold on to the handrail with a death grip so I won't fall and risk breaking any bones. The cognitive impairment I have is not forgetting things. It's the word is there, but I can't get the word from my brain to come out my mouth. I can look out my window at home and see a red cardinal, and I want to say red cardinal, but the words won't come. Something is blocking that from coming out. It's really embarrassing, especially in an environment like this. The daily activities, besides what I have already mentioned, walking or any type of physical exercise because of the fatigue, working in the garden and doing things like that because of the chance of an infection in my arm is just about impossible. And then there is one other side effect that no one wants to talk about, and that's sexual dysfunction or sexual activity. I, like nearly every woman that has taken an aromatase inhibitor, finds that the traditional position of sexual intercourse is extremely painful and uncomfortable. And with that, I would just like to thank the FDA for the opportunity to appear here today and present my comments.
Thank you, Karen. Katie?
My story really begins in 2003. I'm going to read it so I don't diverge or whatever. 2 years before my breast cancer diagnosis, I was living in Germany at the time. I had been having issues with my eyes and had laser and cryotherapy treatment of both retinas. A few months later, on my way to see my mum in Ireland, the retina in my left eye detached. I went straight from the airport with my sister and had an emergency surgery the following morning. 8 weeks, multiple setbacks, and 3 additional surgeries later, I returned to my husband and 4 children in Germany. The entire situation was a nightmare. The pain, the fear of recurring blindness. I had actually gone blind in my left eye at the 3rd detachment. The discomfort of lying in a certain position called posturing for an entire week, getting up only to use the bathroom and eat. I missed my husband's birthday, my birthday, our 20th wedding anniversary, my daughter's graduation. She was salutatorian out of 300 kids. And my son's Eagle Scout ceremony in the time I was in Ireland in the hospital. On my daughter's 18th birthday, July 3rd, the professor released me and I flew back to Germany. While in the hospital, I had unknowingly developed depression. So once back in Germany, I had to see a new team of eye specialists for post-op oil removal for my eyes, routine follow-ups, cataract surgery, etc. We moved house 50 miles away and I got my children sorted in their new schools. On the day we drove my daughter to the airport to go to university in Ireland, we went directly, after dropping her off, to the psychiatric clinic, where I was admitted and spent the following 3 months as an inpatient. There aren't words to describe the horror of depression. Suffice to say, had it not been for my 7-year-old post-vasectomy child at home, who I believe still needed me, I would not be here today. Happily, though, I was one of the lucky ones and eventually got back to living a normal, unmedicated life. So I had a nice, uneventful year in 2004, but in January of 2005, my mum died, and 3 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I tell these stories not because I want a pity party, but they give me perspective when I'm dealing with when I dealt with my breast cancer diagnosis. For me, breast cancer was bad. Retinal problems were worse, and depression was the absolute pit of despair. So in a way, I was luckier than most when I got my breast cancer diagnosis. I'd handled worse. I could do this. 2 of my 3 sisters had already had breast cancer. One a late-stage over 50-year-old, and my younger sister who was diagnosed in her early 40s. My other older sister developed breast cancer subsequent to my diagnosis. We're 4 sisters in my family, and between us we have a grand total of 2 breasts. I've been tested, and I'm not positive for the BRCA1 or 2 genes, which is nice. So I was the only one of my sisters to take what I call the scenic route to recovery. I chose elective bilateral mastectomy, chemo, radiation, etc. I had breast reconstruction some months later, and during that surgery I had my ovaries removed. So we relocated to the United States, and all went well for about 5 years till September of 2009. My oncologist was alerted to my changing status after a routine blood test showed an increase in my cancer marker, 2729. So metastatic breast cancer was confirmed after a PET scan, and once again the roller coaster was in motion. My son said that living with metastatic breast cancer was the ultimate chaos, and I think he truly, truly nailed it. For me personally, the diagnosis of metastatic disease in my bones was very difficult to get my head around. I'm proactive, I face every challenge head on, and I'm willing to move heaven and earth to fix my problems. But this time the dreaded word incurable was part of the equation. For me personally, it was a lonely time because metastatic breast cancer is not well understood in the general community. And as a non-survivor, I felt somewhat a failure in the primary breast cancer community. So for months, cancer was the first thought in my head when I woke and the last before I finally slept. I had mixed results in the beginning of my treatments for what should have been a best case scenario, ER positive metastatic breast cancer to the bone, the best of the metastatics to have. But I wasn't responding well to the usual anti-estrogen regimen, so my oncologist and I decided that I should have a bone biopsy taken from a lesion in my left iliac crest. And that proved to be HER2 positive, which my primary cancer had not indicated. And of course, explains the lack of response to my initial treatments. So when I began to take Herceptin, I had immediate and positive results, but then I developed LVEF problems in my heart as a side effect of Herceptin. It was horribly discouraging, and I had to suspend my treatment on a number of occasions until my heart recovered. But at this time, there was great excitement in the HER2 community about the pending approval of TDM1. I was worried, though, that because of my LVEF status, that I would not be a candidate for the drug when it became approved. So I called Genentech one day, they did the drug, and I spoke to a specialist who reassured me that, however, that I might be a candidate for the expanded access trial. So I had been on a weekly regimen of Herceptin, but the trial dosage was given at 3-week intervals, and actually I had no subsequent heart effects because of that regimen. So I have been on TDM1, which is now known as Kadcyla, for over 2 years, 2.25 years. An amazing, virtual, totally symptom-free 2.25 years. It's been phenomenal. However, since registering a few weeks ago for today's forum, I've been having some new symptoms and am now resistant to Kadcyla. I will begin radiation treatment on my sacrum tomorrow. I hope to begin a new protocol, possibly taking Perjeta within a few weeks. Metastatic breast cancer is a very different animal than primary cancer. My life is hugely dictated by my 3-week chemo cycles. The most I could ever be away for was 3 weeks, which of course for most US citizens would be very acceptable, but I'm an expat and I have siblings all over, Ireland and Europe, and time is always a factor in keeping close family ties, and it's something that's hugely important to me and to them.
Katie, any closing remarks?
Pardon?
Any final remarks?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Dunn, and I'm from San Francisco, California, and I want to thank the FDA for convening this meeting and also for giving me the opportunity to share my story. After finding a lump in my left breast in August 2009, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. While I had 2 tumors, the cancer had not spread to the lymph nodes or outside my breast. I have been cancer-free for the last 6 years. As the majority of my symptoms and impacts were psychological, I would like to briefly describe my treatment approach as the process of decision-making sent me into a serious state of despair. Despite doctors telling me that my cancer was caught early and that I had a high likelihood of survival, I was convinced that my diagnosis meant certain death. No one or no data could convince me otherwise. Most family and friends I knew who had cancer had succumbed to the disease. My stepfather passed away from cancer 3 months before my own diagnosis. When I heard the words, "You have cancer," my body immediately went into flight or fight mode in an extended period of extreme fear and high stress. Normally a very thoughtful and analytical person, I became focused on short-term survival and was unable to think clearly or understand the long-term consequences of my choices. Even my doctor noted that I went from a calm and thoughtful person in my initial visit to a, quote, complete emotional wreck. I wanted to do whatever I could to reduce my risk. As I began to contemplate my treatment plan, I quickly became confused and overloaded with information. Where I hoped to find black or white answers, there was only gray. I spent hours on the internet searching for the right answer. As I insisted in getting the cancer out of my body as soon as possible, I had a lumpectomy 3 weeks after my diagnosis. Because there was a history of early onset prostate cancer on my dad's side, I met with a genetic counselor who recommended that I take the genetic test. I tested positive for a mutation of the BRCA2 gene, but it was a variant of unknown significance. What was I to do? They then asked that my father be tested, and he also had the same variant. So the doctors were pretty sure that, in fact, I had the mutation. I had 2 options: MRIs, constant surveillance, or remove my breasts and my ovaries. This would not necessarily prevent the cancer from returning, but it was the choice that I took to remove my breasts and my ovaries. By this time, the doctors realized that psychologically I needed to feel confident that I had done everything I could to reduce all of my risk, or as much risk as possible. My other treatment options were to consider chemotherapy and an aromatase inhibitor. One doctor said chemotherapy was unnecessary as I was low risk, while another doctor told me I have a young son, so I might want to do everything I could to be around for him. So I decided to take the Oncotype test. Once again, it was not definitive. 18 was low risk. I got a 20. So I took chemotherapy. While I read and was told about all the possible side effects, nothing could prepare me for the emotional and mental upheaval I would experience. I literally felt like I was dying, and I questioned my decision to do the chemotherapy. Every day I contemplated quitting. As I have just described, the symptoms that had the most significance in my daily life were primarily psychological. Fearing for my life, I was paralyzed and immediately became depressed. I was convinced that I would never see my 7-year-old son grow up. I remember sitting in church on Christmas Eve in 2009 thinking, this is my last Christmas. I lost interest in being with friends who were living normal, happy lives compared to the nightmare I was now experiencing. The thought of work was overwhelming, and despite coworkers being supportive, I couldn't bring myself to go to work, so I went out on disability for nearly a year. Many days I didn't get out of bed, instead watching hours of TV to distract myself. I also spent hours and hours on the internet reviewing the same statistics over and over, hoping that it was possible I could survive. I took anti-anxiety medication to try and stop the feeling that I was jumping out of my skin and to numb the pain that I constantly felt. My world was completely out of control, and I really struggled to maintain a sense of calmness. As my mind continually raced night and day, I was unable to sleep for any length of time. I searched for answers, wondering, why me? How did I get cancer? I'm young. I'm healthy. I was supposed to have a full life ahead. In addition to the psychological symptoms, I did experience physical symptoms as well. All the treatments and the lack of sleep contributed to an extremely high level of fatigue I had never before experienced. And to this day, some of that fatigue still exists. Given that my cancer was ER/PR positive, I was prescribed an aromatase inhibitor. The initial bone pain was excruciating, so the doctors had me try 3 different aromatase inhibitors. While some of that bone pain has subsided, I still feel it in my lower back on a regular basis. I have also lost bone density, and I now have osteoporosis. As for specific activities that are important to me that I can no longer do as fully as I would like as a result of breast cancer, this is the biggest area of lasting impact for me. The loss of interest and difficulty with sexual activity and intimacy with my husband has been significant. When discussing the decision about a mastectomy with my doctors, I was told I would lose feeling in my breasts. At that time, I felt like I was fighting for my life, and I wanted to do everything I could to reduce my risk of recurrence. So I was very aggressive. As I mentioned, multiple surgeries, partial radiation, chemotherapy, and an aromatase inhibitor. I had convinced myself I might not even be alive for that long, so I wasn't really thinking about longer-term impacts of my treatment decisions. Never did I realize that my decision for a double mastectomy and oophorectomy would have much deeper psychological implications than just the loss of physical feeling. 6 years later, I am grateful to be alive. I do not regret any of my treatment decisions, but my relationship with my husband has been significantly altered as a result of my decisions. In closing, given that many breast cancer patients are now going on to live long, productive lives, I think it is critical to discuss and consider treatment options in a different manner. I have had the opportunity to talk with a number of breast cancer patients over the years. Many of us are frightened and in a weakened emotional state when first receiving our diagnosis. As I mentioned, it was extremely difficult to understand clearly the implications of my decisions. Should I be one of the fortunate cancer survivors who could potentially be alive for a long time? As someone who did a lot of research around my various treatment options, I had no way to gauge the validity of the various studies I read. As a result of my experience, I am now focused on helping to improve decision support for cancer patients. I firmly believe we need to strengthen the evidence base for decision making, including participation in clinical trials, and better reporting and access to patient-reported outcomes would also provide a huge benefit. Thank you again for allowing me to share my story.
Thank you, Debbie. Sandy?
My name's Sandy Feinstein. I'm from Southern California. I've been fortunate enough not to have to personally face the challenge of metastatic cancer. I was diagnosed over 30 years ago when you were offered no options and only one treatment. When I went for my surgery, I signed an authorization allowing the surgeon to do whatever was necessary without any idea what that decision would be. Today, women are given many options, and these women are expected to make decisions without very much information, decisions that will impact the rest of their lives. This is particularly difficult for the patient who is metastatic at the time of diagnosis. I woke from my surgery to find that both breasts had been removed and began my journey as an advocate to educate women about their disease so when they make a decision, it will be an educated one. I currently facilitate support groups for newly diagnosed patients, those in the middle of treatment, those whose treatment has ended, and those whose treatment will never end. Many concerns are the same for each of these groups, but some are very different when facing the challenge that never to be able to put cancer behind you. As a therapist, patients share many of their concerns with me during individual therapy sessions dealing with the stress and anxiety of the diagnosis. The symptoms that women mention most are pain, fatigue, hot flashes, neuropathy, lymphedema, memory loss, weight gain, vaginal dryness, loss of libido, and bone loss. Patients are frustrated because many of these symptoms are brought on by the medications that they are taking to treat their cancers or to attempt to prevent them from coming back. Pain comes in many levels. Some pain is minor and annoying, while other is severe and debilitating. Some pain can be managed with over-the-counter medications. Some pain requires very heavy medications that can cause other symptoms such as constipation, sleeplessness, or confusion. Bone pain can limit movement, which leads to many other issues such as increased fatigue or depression. Fatigue prevents patients from doing many things, both big and small, from going shopping with friends to limiting the type of vacation they can plan due to the inability to be as active as they would like. Sometimes even going to a support group or a doctor's appointment takes every ounce of energy they have. One metastatic patient told me that she had to be honest with her family and tell them that she had a limited amount of energy and had to choose, often painfully, which things she had the energy to do and which things she could not do. It's difficult when you've been a member of the family who always plans and prepares the holiday dinners, and you can no longer fulfill that role, and you begin to see yourself as someone less important in the family. Hot flashes are the butt of many jokes, but when your life is impacted by them, it's no longer a laughing matter. I had a patient who was an attorney. Her hot flashes were so severe that she had to change her clothing several times a day. It was so bad that she seriously considered no longer doing court work because her concern was that the juror would see her begin to perspire and think she was lying and that her client was actually guilty. Some women have flushing with their hot flashes, which is also embarrassing, and as is the constant taking off and putting on of clothing, or the issue it presents in an office when other co-workers are not experiencing the same weather that you are. Neuropathy can be both painful and dangerous. When you cannot feel where you're stepping when you're going downstairs, there's a possibility of a fall. When you cannot feel what you're stepping on, the chances of you injuring yourself become higher. When you are unable to button your blouse or undo a zipper, you become dependent on others. This becomes a bigger issue when you live alone. Many think that the issue of sexuality and intimacy are issues of only for the young, but that's not the case. Many couples continue to be sexual into their 70s and 80s, and treatment often interferes due to fatigue, pain, or vaginal dryness. Many medications affect one's libido, which can create relationship problems. It's difficult to want to be intimate when you have pain, fatigue, or nausea. Lymphedema, as we've heard, can both be painful and bothersome. For some women, the pain is constant. Lymphedema intrudes into your life, as you must massage your hand and arm several times a day in order to keep the swelling down. It also restricts the type of clothing you can wear, as the sleeve opening must be large enough to facilitate the bandaged arm, as we heard from Karen. One of my patients was very distressed as she was unable to wear many of her favorite items of clothing due to the size of her arm. She felt she could no longer wear anything sleeveless so as not to draw attention to the bandaging. The list I gave you was long, and I hope you can appreciate what many women suffer when dealing with this disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. So I'd like to ask everyone to give our panelists a round of applause. What you shared with us, they're very personal stories, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of my colleagues when I say that you are very brave and very courageous to come here and share those personal stories with us. So thank you very much. So I just want to recap some of the points that we heard from our panelists, and then I'd like to see from those of you in the audience to see how it resonates with you. So Karen mentioned that her life is impacted by just so many doctor appointments. She mentioned that she has cognitive impairment. She said that she can't do some of the things that she enjoyed doing, such as gardening or walking. And she also mentioned that she has sexual intimacy. She has experienced the impact on sexual intimacy. So how many people did that resonate with? Okay, so we have about 9 people in the audience that said that. Katie, you talked about, I think you described depression, you described that it's a roller coaster ride. How many of you did that resonate with? Okay. And Debbie, you talked about the psychological issues, the fear and the anxiety and the depression. Again, how many of you in the audience did that resonate with? Okay, so 5 or 6 people. And then finally, Sandy, you talked a lot about, again, the stress, the anxiety, pain, fatigue from all of the different patients that you've talked with. Okay, great. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of you in the audience that you share similar perspectives or experiences from what our panelists shared. So in just a moment, we're going to hear more from you on how you experience it. But first, I'd like to do a polling question. So do we know we're going to do hands? Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to read this out loud, and then we'll just do, I'm sorry that we're having these technical problems with the clickers, but we'll do another hand-raising exercise. So of all the symptoms you have experienced because of breast cancer, which do you consider to have the most significant impact on your daily life? So we'll just go down the list, and then you can just raise your hand, and then we'll talk more about these in just a moment. So A, pain such as breast pain or bone pain. 1, 2, 3. I see about 7 hands raised for pain. B, swelling. 1, 2, 3, 4 hands raised. C, fatigue or lack of energy. See about 11 to 12 hands raised there. D, depression or anxiety. I see about 8 hands raised for that one. E, cognitive dysfunction such as memory loss. About 4 or so. F, numbness, tingling in the hands or feet. About 4 hands, 4 or 5 hands. G, fertility issues. See about 2 hands for that one. H, menopausal symptoms. About 5, 6 hands raised for that. And I, other symptoms or side effects of cancer treatments not mentioned. 9, 10. I see about 10 to 11 hands raised for that one. And can we see on the web, did we hear something similar?
Actually, pretty much evenly mentioned every single thing listed on here.
Okay. So I believe the one that received the most responses was fatigue. Is that correct? Okay. And then followed by, I think we saw pain. Graham or Pajita, did we see? Okay. And then can you remind me of what the third, was it?
Depression or anxiety.
Okay, depression or anxiety. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry I'm having to check back. Normally we see polling results, so I see exactly what came up, what the top 3 answers were. Okay, so let's talk about, we'll spend some time talking about some of these symptoms, and we'll definitely also spend some time talking about option I, which was other symptoms not mentioned. So I know this might be a difficult question to ask, but we're going to be spending topic 2, talking about the treatments. But if there's a way you can tease out whether the symptom is due to the underlying disease or if it's a side effect of treatment, that would also be really helpful for us to hear when you're describing. So let's talk about. Can we go back to the previous slide? So let's start with the fatigue or lack of energy. Would somebody share with us how they experience the fatigue? Would anybody like to start us off? Yes.
Hi. So to clarify, I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. I was a de novo presentation at age 43. So as a course of my treatment, I was thrown into premature menopause. And the first treatment that I had was tamoxifen, and then after that failed, 2 years later, Femara, and now Faslodex. And I think it would be hard, I would say that my fatigue has grown progressive as I have been on these drugs. It is true, one of our panelists mentioned almost a compromise. You decide, there might be 3 things I want to do, but I know I can only do one of them. So this is what I'll do. The other week I was babysitting. I have triplet, 2 nephews and a niece, and I was watching these 3 children, and I felt frustrated. In terms of I enjoyed being with the kids, but even only after spending like 4 or 5 hours with them, you know, and I was just exhausted. And in terms of my professional life, one of my responsibilities was attending trade shows, and it was so frustrating. I would be at Chicago's McCormick Place and wanting to make my rounds and having to sit down, and the spirit is willing, but the flesh is not, and it's just the lack of control and the feeling much older than your years is quite frustrating.
Thank you, Catherine. And I think, Catherine, you bring up a point that we also heard from the panelists, which was the impact of these symptoms on your ability to work. I remember, I think it was Karen, you mentioned that, or Debbie, you mentioned that you had to make the decision to stop working because of living with the disease. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Would you like to comment? Yes. And if you could state your name.
Hi, my name is Ginny Nachmus, and I've had metastatic breast cancer for 6 years. I thought I'd make my comment now because we're coming up on my nap time. I've had a particular problem with fatigue in the last couple of months. I'm a bit of an outlier, and I've been somewhat fortunate in that I was on the same treatment for 5.5 years. I was on Xeloda, and I have triple negative breast cancer, androgen receptor, bone only, Mets. But 5.5 years on one treatment, anybody that's got metastatic disease knows that's a pretty good record. But I had progression in November, and one of my problems, sometimes people get fatigue, and it's not really related necessarily to blood counts. But in my case, I am chronically anemic now. Once I went off of the chemo, they thought, well, maybe your red blood cells will come back. I'm actually on a hormonal drug now that's used in prostate cancer. But it's been 4 months and it hasn't really, my numbers haven't come back. And the thing that's so frustrating to me, not only that it affects how much I'm able to do, I kind of go back to when my mother was in her 80s. Her rule was 1 thing a day. And that's what I kind of feel like. You can only plan on 1 big thing a day, you know. But what's particularly frustrating for me is there doesn't seem to be any treatment. I've been on Procrit injections to try to bring up the red blood cells, and that I don't think really does work. It seems to have had mixed results, and now insurance doesn't cover it anyways. And so I'm left with doing blood transfusions, which oncologist is really not happy about because I guess they view it more now as almost a transplant. So problems with that. So it's very frustrating to me because you don't seem to have an option, and this is just something that you're going to have to live with. And it is difficult because I'm not young. I'm 64, but I don't think I should go by the 1 thing a day rule that the 89-year-olds used.
Thank you, Jenny. Can I ask a follow-up question? Does it sounds like the fatigue is coming as a side effect of the treatment that you're taking? Is that accurate?
Well, in my case, initially they thought it might be the treatment, but now it's been too long. So now it's a question of, well, is the cancer actually attacking the bone marrow? So they don't really know. But a lot of times fatigue, you just get fatigue for that's why I say mine's a little different. I mean, I do actually have low blood counts. A lot of times people have fatigue with breast cancer, and you really can't point to anything. So it's sort of the same situation. That's why fatigue is so difficult, because there really is nothing to treat it.
Okay. How many of you? Yes, Sandy.
I'd just like to make a comment. Words are very powerful to me, and I think fatigue is not the right word. When we as a general audience think about fatigue, it means we stayed up too late or we garden too much and we're tired and we rest and the fatigue resolves. I think it's important to note that the type of fatigue that patients experience is not like that at all. They can rest and rest and rest, and the fatigue doesn't go away. So when I talk to my patients, I use the word weakness, and that resonates with them a lot more, and they seem to say, yes, that's what it is. It's not that I'm tired, it's that I'm weak. I just can't do these kinds of things. So I sort of make it my challenge not to use the fatigue word, and I'd like to hear comments from some of the other patients, because I think it's misunderstood.
Thank you very much for presenting that perspective. I actually saw several heads nodding as you were speaking, so maybe we can do a show of hands here. Does that resonate with you, that it's the weakness, this persistent weakness versus a more, I guess, temporary type fatigue? So could you raise your hands and does that resonate with you? Okay, great. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other comments? Yes. Oh, no, she'll bring over the microphone to you.
My voice can be big. Hi, my name's Elizabeth Capel. I also have metastatic disease. I think the weakness is more when you're going through treatment, and when you're not in treatment, the leftover side effects can be fatigue, to clarify that. I think it's two different situations. If you're not in treatment, sometimes the long-lasting effects can be fatigue. For me, taking iron supplements helps with that. I have iron-deficient blood. So my hemoglobin can be fine, yet I can still have some types of fatigue left over, but the iron does take care of that.
Okay, very good to know. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's try to move on to another symptom, does anybody have anything else? Yes. Yes, Janka.
Another clarifying question on the fatigue and weakness. Are people able to sleep? Where does insomnia fit into this, a lack of being able to get good quality rest?
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of no's here. Would anybody like to share their perspective? How about right here, Sarah? Thank you, Janka, for your question.
First, I don't have metastatic breast cancer, so I'm fortunate. But I was diagnosed with breast cancer back in '95. So whatever treatment I had worked. But I would like to say with regard to this fatigue issue, the type of fatigue we're talking about, I heard some people say they do have trouble sleeping. Sometimes you're so fatigued that you can't sleep. But even when you do get a good sleep, you are still fatigued. So it's not a tiredness or a fatigue that goes away with rest. And that's the difference between someone who has not had cancer and has not had treatment, that when they've overdone it, or they've stayed out late, and you're healthy, and you have always been healthy, you get a good rest, and you're raring to go again. This is not a type of tiredness that will go away after a few nights of good sleep and good eating. This is something that is always present, and you might have a good day or two, but it's always there. It's here right now. I mean, you just can't get rid of that. It's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it. and I don't know if there is a word to describe it. It just doesn't go away with a good sleep. And if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to understand.
Pervasive exhaustion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm told I didn't say my name. My name's Kim Wright.
Kimberly. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it. So I'm going to, oh, yes. Let's take one more comment.
This is Jamie. I was diagnosed in 2012 with triple-negative breast cancer and had a complete response to neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And I will say the fatigue is definitely a lot stronger when you are undergoing treatment. And we've heard from a lot of women who have metastatic disease, so they're still undergoing treatment. I was not thrilled to find that I still have fatigue now, 2 years later, and it's not nearly as bad. And it's not the one-a-day thing like when I was in treatment. I have young children, so I likened it to when you have a newborn baby. And you can do what you want in the morning, but you must be home at noon because you have to sleep or you can't function. And it's not as bad as that, but there are a lot of times in the evening where I feel like it's just too much energy to open up my computer and like get something off of Amazon. That's just too much energy, and I don't want to do it. And there are definitely afternoons where I'm just so sleepy. And it feels like sleepy, but it doesn't go away just because I sleep. And I think that's something that we've kind of talked about. And I'm guessing it's still lasting effects from treatment. You know, I'm not on any hormonal therapy now or anything. But, you know, it's been a good 2 years and it still lingers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jamie. Okay. So to recap, we're hearing you summarize that it's a pervasive exhaustion. We heard that it can be worse during treatments, but that it's still lingering post-treatments. In some cases, it sounds like it's sort of worsened over time, as you mentioned earlier, that you had treatment several years ago, but you feel as though it's getting worse now. And you mentioned that it is something that with the tiredness and sleepiness, that it's not something it's not just you sleep it off or anything. It kind of lingers and continues to be there. So thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. Any follow-up questions regarding the fatigue? Yes, Jeff.
I'm just curious actually for Katie, while you were on Kadcyla and you said that it seemed to be a very positive experience. Did you have that lingering fatigue during the treatment too, or was it put away for a little bit?
No, not on Kadcyla. It was an absolutely amazing drug for me, and but I also feel I'm sort of very positive, and I love to walk, and so sometimes I would choose to just push myself a little bit and go out and do that walk. I think a lot of this has a sort of a psychological component as well, and that was my way of dealing with it. Right now, I'm fatigued since I've been off Kadcyla and going through some more stuff. But so no, Kadcyla was an amazing drug.
Right, and I wonder if you have a shared experience with the Xeloda too. For 5.5 years, did you have the same type of fatigue too as well, or did that somehow abate a little bit during the treatment while you're having a prolonged response, and then it came back after the treatment didn't work as well, or upon progression?
Yeah, I didn't experience a lot of fatigue when I was on Xeloda. It's really only been the last year and a half when my blood counts really took a hit, and that is a side effect of being on chemo for a long time.
Right.
And now I just can't seem to get beyond it, even though I'm off the drug. And it points to maybe something a little more serious than just the effect of the of being on the drug. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jeff. Are we hearing anything on the web specifically regarding the fatigue?
Yes, we heard very similar perspectives. One person saying that in her experience, the most common thing she's heard patients talk about is fatigue, second being sleep. One person saying that fatigue can vary very much among patients depending on what treatment they are, and another person echoing something we heard about sleep, saying that she feels sleepy all the time and it doesn't go away when she does sleep.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to some of the other symptoms that you've all identified. So I believe pain was also identified by several of you. So would anybody like to talk about how their pain manifests and how do you experience it? Yes.
Hi, I'm Thelma, and I was diagnosed in July of 2007. The pain that I experience can be sometimes almost from head to toe. In the beginning, I had very mild arthritis or either carpal tunnel syndrome. And then over time, it's gotten worse. So my fingers are now sort of lumping up. And on some days, it's excruciating with the pain, or there are days that my hand is in so much pain that I literally have to pry my fingers open. And so that affects my daily activity because I'm a very active person. And there are times that I get the pain in my breast. And when it happens often, I mean, naturally I think, oh, has the cancer returned? So I return to my doctor, and they may say that it could be, it's probably the side effects of the radiation. And then on a daily basis, I think one of the panelists mentioned about the lower back pain. And you have these pains so much that it's either you do some type of medication or drug, which I'm trying to stay away from except the ones that I'm on, exmestocene, the hormonal therapy. But I'm really trying to focus more on complementary therapies because I keep thinking about the toxicity of the drugs. I'm HER2 positive with an unknown primary, so I underwent a lot of drugs in the beginning, and I'm just always concerned about the long-range implications of those drugs.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. So head-to-toe pain, pain in the hands. You mentioned pain in your breast. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Karen, let's hear from you.
Mine is bone, particularly joints and also muscles, and it's not just one place. It moves around. One day, my left knee may just hurt really, really bad for 2 or 3 days, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and then it's something in my right arm. It just moves all over.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Anybody experience that sort of pain that moves throughout the body? Katie? Yes.
It's kind of interesting because for the first, I've only had pain for 2 weeks. It started 2 weeks ago. It was, and after 6 years of metastatic, and it was just excruciating. I couldn't believe it. But the types of, like even in the one episode, there's a sharp skewer type pain. There's a dull ache. There's a throbbing pain, and it comes out of. I mean, the intensity and the sudden onset has just shocked me. You know, in the last 2 weeks, and I thought when you said, Karen, about the muscle pain, I thought I'd pulled a muscle or whatever, because, you know, I walk 4 miles a day, and I thought, okay, I've pulled a muscle or whatever. Well, now it turns out that it's all because of the nerve damage across from the sacroiliac and into the sacrum. But it's just the intensity. I look at my body, I'm saying, who are you? Where's this stuff coming from? In 2 weeks, I can actually almost physically feel the cancer just pinging me. It's going to do what it wants to do, and you're just along for the ride.
Okay, thank you for sharing that perspective. Is there anything that leads to the worsening of the pain? Is there an activity, or is there something about a particular day? Is there an average day of pain versus a more severe day of pain, or is it sort of always there? Would anybody like to? Yes, Debbie?
I was just going to say it's always there. It just kind of moves around. But again, to your point about not really wanting to take the drugs, I've done a lot of holistic things myself and doing exercise and hands-on healing, acupuncture, and all of those really do help.
Okay, great. Yes, let's take one more comment on, yes?
And I also detect when I'm extremely tired, the pain is greater as well. So the two sort of are intertwined.
Okay. So pain. So you see a correlation between the pain and the tiredness or the fatigue or weakness.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good to know. Yes, we'll take.
I think
Sandy?
it's very confusing to women is the pain they're experiencing due to treatment, due to aging, due to hormonal manipulation. So it's very confusing. Should they act on this pain and go to see their physician because possibly it's a recurrence of their cancer or a progression of their cancer? Or is it just a natural sort of aging kind of thing because the lack of estrogen and the manipulation? So it's very confusing and as well as hurting.
Okay. So I think that's a good place to do a show of hands. So it sounds like it is difficult then to tease apart whether it's due to the disease or whether it's due to the treatments. I see a lot of heads nodding. Could you all raise your hand and say, is that a fair statement that it's difficult to tease that apart? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. So, okay. And then what we'll do is, I know you've all mentioned, you identified several of these symptoms. I do want to ask, is there a particular symptom that you didn't know to expect or something that has really sort of surprised you that, you know, it sounds like you've all done lots of research and you've talked to all your doctors, but did something come up that you just didn't know to expect? Yes.
One of the challenges I had very early was dental. I've bought everybody's dental 4 or 5 times over. And in the beginning, in 2007, when I presented this to my doctor, my dentist, he wasn't very receptive to the idea that that's what was causing it. And that was very important for me for him to understand that, because the co-payment on my insurance would have been less. And so was the out-of-pocket experience. But when I asked him to document that, he couldn't seem to agree with me. So as a result, I ended up paying thousands of dollars out of pocket. And now, because I'm a patient navigator and talk to a lot of people, one of the things that I strongly encourage that if you have dental challenges now, you want to make sure that you've corrected that before you go into serious treatment, because it does have an implication.
Okay, thank you. Dental effects, yes.
Living with metastatic disease and doing it for a while now, I'm going on 9 years, 12 years altogether and 9 years metastatic. They're finding that there are more side effects that they were not aware of because people weren't living as long as this. So what's recently happened in the last year was that I have a hole in my septum in my nose. And they said that that is from prolonged use of chemotherapy, and the blood vessels aren't receiving enough blood in my septum, and it actually caused it to erode. So there's nothing they can do for it. It doesn't really bother me. It feels a little weird, but it doesn't bother me. But that's one thing that I definitely did not anticipate, was that my nose was going to fall apart. But the rest of it's still okay, so it's hanging in there.
Okay.
So just finding more and more things since you're living long-term with breast disease.
Right, okay. So nasal issues.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Oh,
Yes,
sorry,
Hannah.
go ahead. I was just going to say that I think anybody that goes through treatment understands that they're going to have some degree of nausea, diarrhea, constipation, and a few of those things. And if you read what side effects are, even on over-the-counter medications, there's so many of them there, and I don't think any of us that have been treated or are being treated for breast cancer know the magnitude that we're going to have the majority of those side effects and how much we're going to have them.
Okay. I saw a lot of heads nodding to what you just said, Karen, so that sounds like it's a shared perspective. Yes?
Hi, my name is Susan Ferris, and I just want to echo, I recently read a study that talked about how the doctors will underestimate how severe the side effects are going to be for a medication. And I hear that repeated by nurses in oncology units all the time, that the doctors do want to report them. For me, it was the severity of, I mean, I looked at the list and I did not realize how bad it was going to be. So that's really what the surprise to me was. Like, you know, it was sort of like I thought I was going to go on a roller coaster ride, but instead I did the straight drop down and it was not fun. So, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. So the severity or the intensity of what you were experiencing, there's nothing to prepare you for that. Yes?
So I'd like to tag a question onto that. Some patients say that if they knew that they're going to have hair loss, they would have wanted a different kind of treatment, whereas others are willing to take much more toxicity. So I'm wondering, is there any toxicity that you can identify which you think would have changed the treatment that you were seeking? That if you knew that that toxicity was going to occur, you would have actually gone for another treatment?
Yes, let's go ahead and hear from Catherine.
My answer will be slightly maybe outside of what you asked, but when I was given the anti-estrogen treatment, tamoxifen, I was told, you know, I would be and also had ovarian suppression, so early menopause, premature menopause. And my doctor said almost certainly I would have hot flashes and so on. So I did have some symptoms, but I waited in dread for these hot flashes, and I am on the minority in that, but thankfully it didn't happen. But overall, it shows you how difficult it is to evaluate treatment, because you can know that these are side effects. What you don't know is how is it going to happen to you specifically, and what is your tolerance for what the treatment may be. So I think it is extremely difficult to quantify, because even I have not had a treatment that causes hair loss, but I know it's a very important issue for, I would say, all patients. But even some patients have found they were told they were going to lose their hair, maybe they had thinning, and if they had good results with the drug. So if they went strictly by, I will lose my hair, they would have missed out on a drug that proved to be well for them. So I think what I am saying is the other side effects, this ties into the anxiety. You don't know what is going, you don't know what the treatment will mean for you specifically.
Thank you, Catherine. And I'd like to just make a call out for those of you who are on the web. If you'd like to dial in to share any phone comments, please go ahead and do so now. And we'll take just another comment, and then we'll check in with the web. Yes. Oh, on the panel. Yes, Debbie.
So despite all the research I was doing, I really wasn't considering toxicity because, again, my mindset was I'm fighting for my life. So if I lose my hair and I feel pain and I don't even know if I'm going to be alive in a year, so I'm not going to worry about toxicity. So that's where I was coming from.
Thank you, Debbie.
I'd just like to add as well, women, when you're diagnosed, you think you're going to die. Now, is there concern about losing your hair? Absolutely. And will some women make the decision not to treat? They will, but those women are few and far between. Most women will actually do more, at least that's been my experience, the maximum in order to save their lives. But everyone starts from a very naive position. When you say nausea, well, there's nausea and there's nausea. And each of us are our own little, clinical trials, how we respond and how we don't. I don't think that we're not informed enough. It's like being dropped into a foreign country. And I'm not pointing a finger at anyone, but physicians, clinicians use language we as patients don't understand. And you're asked to make decisions without the information you need to make that decision, and you don't have time. You don't have time to educate yourself about the language of cancer, the effects of cancer, or how, as someone mentioned, how am I going to respond? Now, I didn't have chemotherapy or radiation therapy or any therapy, but I have hot sweats, what are they? Hot flashes that they are sweats that are horrible. I have joint pain, and that all comes with aging. But I would have done whatever it took to save my life. I was diagnosed young and had 2 small children. That's what was foremost in my mind. Losing my hair, no one wants that to happen. But I don't think a very, very, very small majority of women will opt not for treatment for something like that. That's
Thank
my
you, Sandy.
experience.
Thank you. So Sandy, oh yes, let's hear from, I don't think we've heard from you. Yes.
I'm listening to everybody and I'm relating to what everyone's saying, and I'm a survivor of 2 years now. And the thing that I would, my wish is that we could know what to expect. Onset, duration, and intensity of any of these side effects, whether it can happen, you hear, oh, it's going to, your fatigue's going to get worse with each cycle, right? Well, I wasn't quite prepared for how fatigued I would be by my 6th cycle. Just wasn't. I fell flat on my face. I literally did, and have recovered well. I'm doing well. Wasn't quite prepared for. I still am very active, with lots of energy, and yet I have less energy than I had before I was treated. So no one would really notice that I may be more fatigued than I was before. And so, I'm thinking about, boy, I would love some research out there that looks at for whom, under what circumstances, under what conditions, can we expect, that someone will be feeling, tired, exhausted, or fatigue, pain. Because I think more than anything, I want to be able to plan. If I know when I'm going to be experiencing that, then I can work around that. I'll feel less out of control. And that's one of the other themes I'm hearing too, just feeling that's part of the anxiety. When I'm going to feel what.
Okay. Thank you. And your name?
I'm Joanne.
Joanne. Thank you, Joanne. So correlating the lack of, or not understanding right away what to expect, or the intensity or severity of what to expect, correlating that to the anxiety that you feel. Okay.
And can I just share, because I think that's an interesting question, but a paradigm shift on the way we're addressing it. Because the women here, I get the impression we're all fairly well read, but then there's that segment of the population that, you have challenges in just getting them to a mammogram because of fear. So then if you start telling them after they've got a diagnosis from that fearful mammogram that has taken them years to get, if you start telling them about the challenges that they are going to experience, then I can assure you that that's going to delay their treatment even greater. So we have to find a way to not only to mitigate their fears, but to help them to understand their treatment choices in a way that they will reach out to it. And that's very difficult when the fear factor is very pervasive, because they've heard everybody in their neighborhood say all of the horrible things about it. They rarely hear the benefits of undergoing any type of cancer treatment.
Thank you very much. And we'll take another comment.
Just want to point out we're going to be going to a break pretty soon, but we will talk much more about treatments and treatment considerations in the afternoon. So
we'll take one more comment and then we'll check in with the phone and we'll go to break.
Ginny Knockmoose again. I was just thinking when and Sandy made her comment, and I thought it was a very good one, that in early stage cancer, you're trying to save your life, so losing your hair in the long term is not that big a deal. And I think that's a great point to illustrate the difference between early stage and metastatic. I mean, early stage, yes, you're trying to save your life, and you'll put up with just about anything, because what is it going to be, 6 months, a year, you can get through it. When it comes to considering symptoms and side effects for metastatic, it's quite a different decision. You're going to go on this drug, you're going to lose your hair. Well, for how long will I ever get it back? So it's a different. Obviously, it's a different perspective. But I'm a patient, but I'm also a patient advocate for Metastatic Breast Cancer Network. We're a patient group, and what I've noticed is that, and I just want to say this for all the young women out there, particularly those with that are raising families that are metastatic, they are willing to put up with so much more toxicity just for the sake of being there as long as they possibly can for their children.
Thank you, Jenny. So let's go to the phones. And do we have any callers on the line? Operator, do we have anyone lined up for a phone?
Hi, this is Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hello.
Hi. So yes, I was diagnosed about 2 years ago at the age of 34. Very active person. I am triple positive. I had a double mastectomy, 13 lymph nodes removed, and there was cancer found in the lymph nodes. Had no problems with chemotherapy, didn't need any kind of radiation or anything like that. I was actually at stage 3, but had severe problems with tamoxifen, including very bad hot flashes, depression for the first time in my life, bloating, abdominal pain that would have me sometimes double over. So I have chosen to stop taking tamoxifen. And I have also chosen to not go on an AI because my quality of life is more important to me than living with something that makes me feel less like a woman. And being young, the other thing too is I had lost the ability to want to be intimate or sexual with anyone. And that's something that's very important to me, and if I can't have that, I would rather go through chemotherapy and other treatments again if the cancer comes back versus go through something that's going to take away my quality of life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. And no more. Okay, so there's no more. Okay, and can we just get a summary of anything else we've heard on the web for topic 1?
Just 2 small points from an earlier conversation. So one person was talking about pain and tingling where their lymph nodes were removed, and also just getting pain over random body parts after the surgery. And somebody else was talking about suffering from cataracts and thrombophlebitis after tamoxifen treatment, and wasn't sure if it was a side effect or something related to the cancer.
Okay, thank you. I know there's so much more that we could discuss for topic 1, but we'll take a short break now. Let's say 10 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about topic 2. Thank you again.